very hard to follow and speak and follow this type of panel. I've been to a lot of seminars and conferences over the last few months. I've never been to one where you share 30 minutes or less. You know, you have 3 speakers who essentially really has crystallized what we all need to know about the perfect marriage between America, US and China. And it's really very difficult for somebody like me who can match that sort of a caliber, particularly as investment bankers or to be formal investment bankers soon. This is not the most popular time for investment bankers because we are largely blamed for what have happened. And so I certainly am not here hoping to be able to summarize what went wrong, because a lot of people are saying that you guys are the one that really are what went wrong. But I do think I wanted to briefly speak, not as an economist, because clearly nothing beat the 3 speakers in terms of clarity and perceptiveness and insight. But I just want to ask a few questions of laypersons, because we were told many times over the last year that this is a crisis of 100 years, this is a crisis like the 30s, this is the crisis like the Great Depression, and we keep hearing that. But we at the same time keep wondering why we don't have people lying on the street trying to, in the 1930s, we have people lying on the street taking, trying to take porridge and trying to, bring just enough bread to, back home. We have that kind of crisis. That doesn't seem to be what we are experiencing, what we are witnessing every day, and not in the States and not in China. I think clearly in the States, this is a huge crisis that affect many deeply. But at the same time, we also have to realize, as a layperson, you also look at the Americans' lifestyle today. I think the impact of the crisis to them is largely emotional, sentimental, not really life impact. We are talking about they're living a 5,000 square feet house. Today, the poor couple has to only do with a 3,000 square feet house. And they used to have 4 cars, now they have to live with 2. And they really have to live with a tougher life now because the kids cannot go to private school, but they can only go to the local excellent public schools. So the misery of life that we are supposed to see in the aftermath of a major crisis like this doesn't seem to be real, but the emotional pain is absolutely evident. I'm not trying to really make light the sufferings of people in Detroit, a lot of the people who lost their jobs. Clearly, the impact of this crisis is massive, but we are no longer in the 1930s. Our life is so massively better now that our ability to, bear with the crisis is a lot more reasonable today. We're talking about our lifestyle changing significantly, but our basic well-being has not really been affected. Just look at the General Motors and all the Detroit bailout. People are talking about major negotiations are happening with taxpayers' money at stake, and people are talking about keeping dental plans or a particular dental plans vis-a-vis some other compromises and concessions the union have to take. So we are talking about a very different kind of suffering that we saw back in the 1930s. So I just want to make sure that behind all the major, all the economic data which clearly indicate this is the crisis of 100 years, once in 100 years, but this is not a crisis that is going to trigger revolution, certainly not in the United States. But what about China today? Clearly China, as we have heard, the perfect marriage is coming to an abrupt end, and the impact is likely going to be massive because the production level, the consumption levels, no matter how you look at it today, particularly today's presentation, clearly indicate that we're going to see a lot of things coming. Particularly the last point, this stimulus measure, 4 trillion in renminbi of money spending out literally in months by bureaucrats. And then, when you see hotels in this part of the region next to the NCRD are completely packed for months, with people who are basically having big bags and hoping to go home with a bag full of loans from the States, because there's just so much money that need to be doled out in such a short period of time. You know, there's only one thing you can guarantee with that, that is the next wave of non-performing loans, because that's not the way money is supposed to be loaned to industries. And they are indeed loaned to productions, they are loaned to, even though they may not loan to bridges and roads to nowhere, but they probably are loaned to production capacities that has no one to satisfy, no one to meet, and no one to buy. So we are seeing that next crisis looming potentially. But if you go around China, you know, I think, you know, short of some spaces in Dongguan, almost everywhere you go, the restaurants are packed, theaters are packed, streets are packed, traffic's jammed. You really don't see a crisis of 100 years hitting China. Why is that? I think, you know, obviously, the charts we have just seen clearly tell a picture from a layperson perspective. Yes, you know, this crisis for China probably happened 10 years too early. I think for the United States, it happened 10 years too late. This thing should have happened in 2000, but people don't want to stop the big partying, so they continue to lend, creating another boom, and finally it bursted 10 years later. For China, maybe for another 10 years, we will be so strong economically, politically, and we will have so much, you know, economic means to make sure that the social safety net is built and established, that we will no longer have to worry about political implications of our growth model. Clearly today, you know, we are going to have to worry. But today, if you look at today, we have been growing at 12%, you know, for years, or 10, 12% for years. That is never supposed to be sustainable. The Chinese never need that kind of a growth. That kind of growth never really brought anything for billions of ordinary Chinese in terms of, if you look at that kind of growth, if we're growing that massive, we should be changing apartment every other years. We should be changing cars every other years. We have not been able to do that. We have not done that. So clearly, China, the growth is, on the one hand, is a myth, is a number. That is a number that is matching the bubble that is coming across the Atlantic, across the Pacific. And that bubble is clearly all real air. And it has not, unfortunately, it happened, it bursted, now we're going to have to calm down. But fortunately, that bubble has not really generated into net worth for individuals, ordinary Chinese, as of yet. I think, you know, we are seeing a very big hypothetical economy because all the massive growth that, again, as the professor indicated, that is fueled by loans and by debt, is now going to come down. But that has never translated into real wealth in China yet. It's translated into the massive foreign exchange reserves the state has because of the system we have. You know, all the money get accumulated by the state. So that has stayed there. I think it's a number. That number is 2 trillion, 3 trillion. Probably now it's going to come down to 1.5 trillion, maybe 1 trillion. But the fortunate thing for China is that a lot of that growth has not translated into ordinary folks' everyday life. I think a portion of that has. You know, we are getting incrementally better off every year. We are buying slightly better cars every year. We're buying slightly, you know, more and more people start to buy the first apartment. Very few are buying the second apartment. And I think we're beginning to going through some consumptions. But the fortunate thing is the massive growth we see China has experienced over the last 10 years have not really, only a small portion of that has been reflected in ordinary people's lives. That's a good news today. Why is that a good news today? Because today, when you talk about the shrinking economy, the shrinking GDP, or whatever is shrinking, ordinary Chinese still feel enrichment. We are not feeling a shrinking family income yet, because a lot of those has not really coming down to every family. Yes, the closing downs of all the solvent plants that satisfy the export boom, a lot of the farmers, a lot of the migrant workers are coming home. They probably don't have a job waiting for them anymore. But for them, the bad thing is that over the last 10 years, their labor, their blood, and their sweat has not generated into massive earnings for them necessarily at home. I think they generated some small earnings, some small wealth, they're sending the money home, the children can go to school now, they can start to build some sort of a rock house now, they can start to have a better food at the Chinese New Year. So things are getting better, but now they may not have that anymore, but hopefully something will happen sooner. So I think China, the economy has always, we need to look at economic development both from an economic perspective, but more importantly from a political perspective. Because 12% growth rate is not something everybody really have to have. It's probably never going to happen again anytime soon anyway. But really, 8% is better, 7% better, 6% better. What is better? Basically, people are asking one question. At what level of the growth were we going to see some real political problems here in China? Because stability, politics are more important in this country, and in this country of 1.3 billion people, stability is more important than anything else. The good thing about the last 10, 15 years is that the state has got extraordinarily wealthy. The massive foreign reserves, the massive accumulated growth has now been accumulated at the state level. I think that's a good thing for now because finally, with this economy, with this model no longer can sustain, it's time for us to think about certain, let's not call it redistribution, let's call it rebalancing. I think we need to balance between the regions, we need to balance between the rich and the poor, we need to balance between the development and environment, we need to balance between, development, growth, and social justice. I think it's time for us to spend more money there. I think the state will spend more money. The state certainly has a lot more money. I think maybe the state will have less of that because of this decoupling or this breaking down of this marriage. But I think at least politically speaking, we're not facing crisis in China. Everybody's still better off. And yes, a few billionaires probably will be hit big time, but they will become half billionaires. I think they can live with it. But ordinary folks, we're still growing at 10%, 20%. We're still making more money. We're still buying the next apartment. I think China, we have hope. And a lot of numbers are not real in the first place. And the destruction of those numbers today is not real anyway. So let's not be terribly pessimistic. That's my 2 cents of being a glass half full. Thank you.